Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada and indeed around the world, and a special welcome to our friends at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 22 November 2024. The title of this update is Shock and Awe, and it kicks off by remarking on last week's update that spoke to the possibility of a sea change on the political front due to Trump's tidal wave win in the election of 5 November 2024. Some initial and resulting upshots foreseen for Canada were those associated with certain economic files. Canadian EVs, for one, will be left in search of a market, even as Canadian energy policies will crash on the shores of an energy-independent America. It is now apparent, as Trump assembles his administrative team, that these upshots will be the few among the many that will be rolling over Canada over the next 4 years of a Trumpian United States of America. Indeed, they will be pummeling our fair nation in much the same way that waves of B-52 bombers, otherwise known as big, ugly, fat fellows or buffs, pummeled Iraqi ground troops during the Desert Storm operations of 1990 to 91. I remember the carnage created by such waves vividly, thanks to my front row seat in the CF-18 combat air patrols located 10 nautical miles off the Kuwaiti coast during that conflagration. This as my wingman and I flew racetrack fleet protection patterns at 30,000 feet. From my perch at 30,000 feet, I could see the fiery devastation unfold before me as wave after wave of three-plane buff formations laid down fire and steel on their targets. Each aircraft carried an armament load capable of obliterating 1 square kilometer of terrain and, as such, struck fear into those on the wrong end of the mission. Indeed, the psychological fear being instilled in Iraqi troops as a result of such operations was deemed to be fully responsible for 24% of Iraqi desertions. I could fully support the veracity of such statistics given my recollection of such attacks lighting up the dark Mideast sky like 1,000 lightning storms and the related thunder actually rattling my cockpit 10 miles out from bomb impact and 30,000 feet up. It was shock and awe on an unbelievable scale and, in a political sense, can be seen to have a parallel in the sea change about to be unleashed as a result of Trump's recent landslide win. One Trump appointee to be installed in his newly minted administration promises to unleash a substantial measure of comeuppance. He would be Tom Homan, and he comes to the American cabinet as a former acting director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to take up the position of border czar. Mr. Homan will be charged with reversing the disastrous immigration policies of the Biden administration and the resulting uncontested importation of millions of illegals, including an entourage of thousands of murderers. He mixes no words when he warns illegals that they had better start packing now, as he sets in motion an unprecedented program of targeted arrests and no-nonsense deportations. The consequences for Canada are considerable, as our own borders will inevitably come under pressure as the uninvited leave America looking for economic succor in the next best venue they can exploit, namely Canada. Tom Homan is not the only Trump appointee that will be consequential to Canada. Marco Rubio is slated to be Secretary of State and has a great deal to say about America's security-light northern neighbor. He was so concerned about Canada's importation of Gazan refugees and tag-along terrorists, for example, that he drafted a letter of concern with dozens of other senators to warn the White House. Then there was a critique of Justin's eulogy for family friend Fidel Castro, in which he stated, quote, "Is this a real statement or a parody? Because if this is a real statement from the PM of Canada, it is shameful and embarrassing," unquote. Then there is the National Security Advisor appointee, Mike Waltz, who despises our Prime Minister so much that he, quote, "isn't just predicting the defeat of Canada's government, he's celebrating it." It would not be a stretch to say, with powerful players like Rubio and Waltz bemoaning Canada's carelessness, that the Trump administration is developing a defensive breach in Canada's ability to wall off and protect its domestic priorities. Canada's ability to build and sustain an extensive cradle-to-grave social safety net over the decades was founded on the fanciful notion that freeloading works. Indeed, it works so well that the public purse could be tapped for essentials like funding sexual and reproductive rights, climate change, and gender equality programs in faraway countries and absent any national interest. This is to the tune of billions of taxpayer dollars, even as national defense and security programs were cut beyond the bone. Then there were the priorities associated with the UN's Agenda 2030. Canada's commitment to realizing the 17 sustainability goals of Agenda 2030 has been an overriding priority ever since the Conservative Party of Canada, under Stephen Harper, signed onto the pact in 2015. It is interesting to note that the C3RF in-hot interview with Max Bernier at the 37-minute mark, that this binding commitment was made by our then Prime Minister with little to no consultation with his cabinet of the day. This first-hand account by a Minister of the Crown, which Bernier was at the time, speaks volumes on the nature of the distance between Canada's top executive leadership and those who elect them into political power. Now, besides fanciful abortion programs abroad, these electors would be saddled with other big-ticket items like net zero CO2 reduction programs and free-for-all immigration gambits that Canada is now fully seized with through the Century Initiative and the UN's Global Compact on Migration. Agenda 2030 priorities, all that America under Trump is now walking away from. One can be forgiven for seeing the development of a full-scale assault on such woke Canadian policies. In the military sense, such full-scale assaults are characterized by a combination of factors that provide one side of a battle with the forces, willpower, and strategies required to crush an enemy and use everything it has to do so. Such attacks have been executed throughout military history, with one of the most formidable being the breaking of the Muslim siege at the gates of Vienna in 1683. In that instance, a Christian alliance of Polish, Saxon, Austrians, and Germans came together in the forests above Vienna to mercilessly rout the forces of Islam that besieged the city. In doing so, they answered a call for help from Holy Roman Empire Leopold I, and in the end, their endeavors were credited with putting Islam on a back foot and saving Europe from becoming an Islamic colony. And so it is in present-day Canada that the regime is seized with defending societal, climate change, and immigration policies that, although congruent with Agenda 2030 aims, have struck at the moral sensibilities, pocketbooks, and security concerns of everyday citizens. There is little doubt that this combination of factors, like those that led to turning back Islam at the gates of Vienna, led to Trump's surprise landslide victory south of the border. The question for Canada and the rest of Western world becomes, will it happen here? It would seem to be inevitable, as Canadians have already shown a propensity to fight back against such developments so far removed from their own interests. After all, isn't this what Freedom Convoy 2022 was all about? Much more than this, however, is the fact that such rank-and-file citizens as these now enjoy the support and the full weight of authority of a newly installed American government. Between Canadians rising up to challenge the narratives of their own government and a cavalcade of newly minted and powerful American political authorities calling out these same policies, we are beginning to see the contours of a full-scale assault. In the former instance, we are seeing citizens dumping legacy media misinformation to seek truth of slush fund, election interference, and even parliamentary treason scandals on uncensored media platforms like X and Rumble. In the latter instance, we are seeing the likes of America's new border czar boldly advising Canadians to find a better prime minister, as Justin Trudeau is, quote, terrible, unquote. A slap in the face that undoubtedly is a prelude to a full-scale assault. In closing, a reminder to join us at CanadianCitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including links to all of the cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF Member Updates from its drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from C3RF.